Great.
Good to go.
Thanks, Stefan. So, welcome to the 6th Attire seminar in the series. This is being hosted by HUMA, the Institute for Humanities in Africa. I'm here in Cape Town, South Africa, and we have participants and audiences from other parts of the world. This session is being recorded, so just to let you know, it's being both streamed live on Facebook and also recorded for later use. So today's presenter is Fanny Chabrol. Maybe Fanny, would you say your surname for me? Because I've been saying it that way, but I'm not 100% sure.
It's good. It's Chabrol.
Chabrol. Okay. Well, yeah. I'll do my best. Thank you. So welcome to the series, and we're really looking forward to hearing your presentation and seeing your presentation. So you supplied 2 papers about the future hospital before this presentation. One of them is an introduction to a series, and the second is looking at a particular hospital in Niamey in Niger, which is being built by China. I really enjoyed reading your papers. I loved the language that you use and the ways that you describe hospitals as these multiple places. Hospitals are not one thing, but many things. And I recognize some of the language from anthropology, such as historical thickness and effective materiality. There was a good phrase, talking about hospitals in their geopolitical situationness and mundane everydayness. So Fanny Chabrol is a research fellow at the Institute for Sustainable Development Research, and she's currently attached to the Center for Population and Development in Paris. Fanny has a degree in sociology, a PhD in sociology, and her research focuses mainly on infectious diseases and access to healthcare in public hospitals in Africa, the politics of health reform, and Africa-China health cooperation, including through the building of new hospitals, such as the subject of this paper. I was actually reminded when I was reading your paper in the description of hospitals as being both warm and cold, labyrinthine and intimate, of my own experience as a hospital worker when I was about 19 years old. And I worked as a porter, a hospital porter in one of London's biggest hospitals, Queen's College Hospital. And that was a quarter mile from the end of the longest corridor, to the other. So every day you'd walk miles through the hospital, taking patients backwards and forwards from their wards to where they needed their examinations. So yeah, hospitals are, definitely fascinating spaces. So thank you very much for being here, and yeah, let's hear from you. We'll have your presentation for about 25 to 30 minutes, and then we will have a discussion.
Yes, okay, thank you. Ralph, can you see me in my presentation now?
I can see your slides, and I believe you need to be spotlighted. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, great. So I'll start now. I want to thank you, the organizers of this seminar series, Ralph, Fernanda, and Divine, for the invitation. I'm really grateful for this opportunity for discussion, especially in these days when, we all feel a bit isolated, and myself, I feel, far from the continent where I used to work and I like to work. So today I'd like to discuss this idea of future hospital and engage in a discussion and an exploration of, to stimulate question of how we might want to approach this idea and how to start new investigations, maybe challenge that very notion of hospital, future hospital, with regards to how we can experiment ourselves also in relation to various disciplines, fields, and methods. But before that, I just wanted to start and mention, from where I come from. So now I'm in Paris. That's where I was trained as a sociologist and anthropologist. And I'd like to acknowledge the legacy of my PhD supervisor, Didier Fassin, who worked on the anthropology of healthcare, social and racial inequalities, And at the time I was starting my PhD, I was working in South Africa, collaborating with Deborah Posel and Ellen Schneider at Weiser, Johannesburg, on the experience and the politics of AIDS in post-apartheid South Africa. And he really supported my project in Botswana on antiretroviral medicines. And it's really how I learned to do ethnography, to dare to go to a hospital and just, I think it was the first advice, and maybe one of the main advice was you just go to the hospital, to accident and emergency ward, and see how patients are being treated, what's happening there, how, you know, how inequalities and unequal lives materialize in specific places that are hospitals. So hospitals became really my training as an ethnographer, and I think I have never left them, and they never failed to surprise me somehow. So having said that and express my gratitude for the work I'm able to do today, I'd like to introduce 3 propositions for today, and really these are just a proposition for discussion. Firstly, I'd like to, sorry, it's not moving here. Yeah, I'd like to start to say how important is it to study new hospital. They are privileged sites to understand the political economy and geopolitics of healthcare on the continent and beyond. And this Chinese-built hospital in Niamey, Niger, will serve as a paradigmatic example. Secondly, I will say a few words on what was our intention when we opened this hospital multiple series in Somatosphere. And thirdly, I'll share thoughts and questions on, you know, the future hospital as a collective project that HUMA is currently launching, and I'm really excited about it. So firstly, I'd like to start by speaking about new hospital, but of course I'll start by old hospitals, right? New hospitals are very often related to the closing of hospitals. And my interest in new hospitals started when I did a small research on the closure of the Charity Hospital in New Orleans. This you know, big public hospital was closed in 2005, just after it was hit by Hurricane Katrina. And it was really analyzed as a perfect case of disaster capitalism, when crises allow for radical political measures, privatization, and radical transformation of the healthcare system itself. And I'm sure we can discuss this, you know, right now around the world, how crises, you know, allow for rapid, radical transformations. And at that time in New Orleans, there were campaigns and battles for its reopening. People were attached to this infrastructure that has always meant access to healthcare for the poorest and racialized communities. So observing both, you know, its ruination of this, you know, beautiful Art Deco building in the city to the sight of everyone, and at the same time the construction and opening of a brand new state-of-the-art hospital that was called Medical Center and not hospital, just a few blocks away in the new bioscience district in New Orleans. I realized the importance of this shift and the importance of history and politics and effects of closing hospitals and building new ones. So yeah, I really think it's an interesting location for analyzing transformation of healthcare system and social welfare systems in our global capitalist world. New hospitals are speculative infrastructures that comes with future-oriented aspirations, speculations about new markets, medical promises, and various, you know, development expectations. These are spatio-temporal projects that convey different visions of the future, of the community, of nation. These are desires, hopes, and aspirations of a society, and in a sense, of course, they are biopolitical in that they wish to transform and organize a society differently. So having said that, I will switch to that project that I started more recently on the topic, the question of Chinese-built hospital in the African continent, because as part of its long-standing health cooperation with African country, China is building and donating hospitals, dozens of hospitals throughout the continent to African government. And I decided to locate this project in Niamey, in Niger, because there was a very big, quite beautiful and grandiose hospital that was just opening with the promise of offering highly specialized medical care and surgical care. It is a referral hospital, a 500 beds hospital that is supposed to be a model for the country. Well, we have to remind that Nigeria is a very poor country. It's the poorest country according to the UN. It has considerable needs of enhancing the level of quality healthcare for all. And really for that hospital, the aim of Nigerian officials was to be able to avoid the high costs of sending Nigerians abroad for treatment, and also to serve as a reference for the entire health system while offering new services and being a model of care. So that's why many people there refer to this hospital as a hospital that has to be different. It's how they define it, it's how they desire it, and so most importantly, and to depart from, to distinguish itself from existing hospitals that are often called mouroir, a place to die, and are really known for the very bad quality of healthcare in the existing structure. But this hospital is a very sensitive topic. It's really the hospital of the president. It is quite difficult to access it. It touches upon the state, as many hospitals, of course. And it is going to mobilize huge resources, financial resources, material resources, human resources, and it will, and many people know and acknowledge that it will probably benefit to the most wealthy citizens because the cost of care are quite high. So I really experienced and came to understand how productive and disruptive a new hospital could be. And my intention with this project was to try to apprehend the diversity and the variety of possible research direction. It was quite exploratory in a sense. I wanted to get a sense of the intensity of social, economic, political processes at stake in staffing the hospital, in making it a functional structure. And actually, the government is ready to implement health reforms, but more than that, actually at stake is the reform of the state, of regulation, the idea of a modernization of the state, new public management practices, and many things that are needed actually if this hospital and this model is to be implemented. So there are many aspirations for change, but also many resistance to it. So it's of course it's contradictory in its very nature. And what I was of course interested in is also the geopolitical project. This newly constructed referral hospital in Niamey has attracted various other foreign powers: India, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, who are donating materials, who are coming for short-term medical campaigns, for humanitarian type of short interventions. And there are other hospitals that are being built, especially by Turkey, everywhere in other places in Niamey. So it's really something that is very important in terms of the geopolitics and also the securitization of the region in Niger and Sahel. So I think as a medical anthropologist, I wanted to experiment original approaches to hospital and really try to see how it is to consider the massive building, its architecture, the circulations of people, of air, of material, the emplacements, and the numerous topics that can be studied. And what was actually very productive is a study. It's not part of this paper, but a study that we did with a student in geography. We studied the waste management in this hospital and all the socio-technical system coming from China, the translation work by technicians, professionals, and cleaners around three emblematic objects such as gloves, syringes, and cardboard. Is it the right term for when things are delivered? Yeah, and cardboard, and seeing where they go in this hospital and trying to map out the circuits and the point where there is, ruptures in the management of these particular objects. With all the risk involved, and we try to question the emergence of a new waste management culture in this hospital that is supposed to be really a model and exception. And we realize how innovation take place and there's a new culture, but this culture kind of stops at the walls of the hospital, because behind the walls of the hospital is the practice of the city waste management that is quite inefficient. So it's somehow also a study about an enclave in town and an enclave in a health system. But really, I wanted to, of course, emphasize the multiplicity and the plurality. That was really what we wanted to do with this series, the hospital multiple. And I think at a moment last year that we kind of all remember, in March, April, hospitals became, the main location, the mainstay of COVID responses, especially if you remember this Chinese hospital, the deployment, the incredible deployment of hospitals. And we were, kind of bothered about the centrality of hospital and hospital centralism, and we sought to continue to challenge their power, their attraction, the cost, the significance of hospitals as medical institution. But we wanted also to explore the possibility of grasping a hospital otherwise. And the diverse ways in which they are positioned in their particular context of all over the world. That's what we call, so hospital as such, as with all its contradiction and multiplicity, and the idea that yes, it's not just about medicine, it's not just about medical care, even though of course COVID pandemic reinforces a vision of hospitals as infrastructure of health, high-tech care. I don't know for South Africa, but in France, it's really about, physicians, specialists, les réanimateurs, we call those who do intensive care unit. They are those who are really made visible, really. And it's interesting what you said, Ralph, because just a few days ago, I was trying to interview the porters actually, and the nurse who is managing them, and she was explaining all the questions, and it was really very interesting. And of course the invisibility of them, their background, what they can do, what they cannot do. They can, interact with the patient, but they cannot touch or do something because it's a responsibility, and many things that can be said about that. But so I think we most of all we wanted to invite for a critical, I don't know if it's the word, offbeat look, like a look, un regard décalé at hospital spaces, and open to, of course, non-medical dimension, economic, political, architectural, military, sensorial, as you were saying about, you know, cold and warm, and yeah, so, and I think this idea of multiplicity is also an invitation to cross boundaries and disciplines, of course, and that's also how I understand the hashtag Future Hospital project at HUMA, and this program about, you know, future hospital in relation to ethics of care, and what it is to be a human, and about being human. And I think it's important to remind that hospitals can be so dehumanizing, you know, especially in these days where, you know, family visits are forbidden, and this is very, very cruel. So and they are a place of danger. So they question the very you know, matter of what it is to be a human. And also, how do we question hospitals and the future of care, not in terms of prediction and programming? And I'm also you know, reminding of what Ralph said in his presentation of, you know, the future is not about, you know, predicting and trying to build the best hospital or to program for such and such project. It's something else, I guess. And first of all, I wanted to say that I think the future hospital is different from the hospital of the future. That is, you know, if you look in Google, what you'll find is this kind of images of, you know, a typical, perfect, brand new, clean bedroom, hospital bedroom, single patient inside, and there's often just one person inside, and in front of different screens, you know. And so that's why also I think the artificial intelligence and hospitals a project that you are launching at HUMA are really, really fantastic. They try to render visible the many invisible processes undergoing in this in the making of this hospital of the future, that are often synonym to smart hospital or digital hospital, that are made, you know, desirable for governments and for business. When you know that the biggest international consulting firms, McKinsey, Deloitte, are really at the core of this kind of, you know, imaginary and producing this particular economy, and presenting, you know, this kind of hospital as a solution for an optimized care pathway, an economicized healthcare provision, etc. But so I think, and what we can try to discuss together, that in the future, in the, I'll say, hashtag Future Hospital, there is more than that. I think it's an invitation to discuss, and it's an invitation for participation, for something collective about, you know, what kind of place, location can a hospital be, what kind of, you know, consistent with which, you know, desires, ethics of care, decolonized place, and we can take speculation also as an approach to reappropriate the idea of hospital of the future as something that citizens can engage with, are part of. Maybe they want a hospital that is first and foremost hospitable, safe, beautiful, functional, that cures, but do surgery, but do biomedicine and other medicines and other approaches to care. Maybe it's located in specific places and neighborhoods, and maybe it deals with medical waste in a way that reduces the environmental impact of hospital. So I think it's maybe another facet of speculation, right? It's in the word of Puig de la Bella Casa, a speculative commitment to think about how things could be if they generated care. So yeah, I think maybe it's that's maybe what we can also think about, taking future as a methodological and analytical tool. And here I'm very new and very fascinated by, the possibilities with future studies in terms of tools, in terms of methodological tools to experiment, to dream, to collaborate, to mobilize also ourselves to be able to maybe contest or claim, ownership over this hospital. So yeah, I think I think it's an invitation to think, to enact multi or transdisciplinarity. I don't know if it's the what I should use, between social scientists, artists, nurses, physicians, cleaners, engineers, architects, and I think I'll end up like now on my presentation. I think I just want to finish by saying that this can be fun and really interesting and surprising, and I think there's so much to do that I prefer to spend time now with the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fanny. That was a great presentation. And let's just see as we get ourselves set back up again for the discussion. So I think you can stop.
Yeah, here.
Stop screen sharing.
Thank you.
And then we're back here. Thank you. And then I think we can do a co-spotlight or me, yeah, something like that. Thank you. Great. So yeah, you'd commented after seeing the presentation I gave like a month or so back, which was looking at my plans for research in investigating the hospital, which is a completely new site for me. And it's great to hear about some of the practical and creative work that you've been doing with a range of hospital workers, and also the way that you've been using objects as a way of interacting with these participants, like talking about the gloves, the syringes, the cardboard boxes, because object studies is also another fascinating area, with figures like Bruno Latour, for example, contributing to it, or ways of using objects as the access point to socio-technical assemblages. So yeah, really fascinating work. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking further about our research. So we're at the discussion point of the seminar, and so we can have open questions. And I think that Fanny also had perhaps prompts to assist discussion if useful. So Fanny, I don't know if you wanted to say any of the things that might be useful for you to hear or discuss.
Yeah, okay, no problem. I think one of the main issue, and we sometimes don't want to talk about it, is the question of accessibility of hospitals. I think we all experience while trying to work with hospital or in a hospital that it's a difficult place to access. It's regulated by biomedical ethics, and it's sometimes very difficult, not only as an anthropologist to negotiate your own presence, but I think in terms of regulatory aspects. So I'd like to if we can share experiences of, and also the fear that more and more hospitals can become bunkers, difficult to go inside. So I think it's kind of a fear, but it's also something that I think it's always nice to discuss, especially given the fact that what we want to do is to go beyond the study of HIV/AIDS or the study of this particular disease, one single disease approach that hospital people or directors can always understand. You're a social scientist, you can, the experience of patients but what if we do something else? What if we experiment with professionals, with workers? And I think that is something to discuss. So another question that is completely related is about ethics. And I know that at Huma you really want to have this big conversation about ethics, and I think that's also a place to think about ethics. I talked also about transdisciplinarity. I think with Divine we talked. I mean, last year I think was about that, about how to, which kind of arena or space we can make to really be able to discuss with engineers and architects and all these specialists, and at the same time with lay professionals, or I don't know if it's the right word. I have many questions about the futurist approach. I'm really interested into it. Also about, I use the word speculation, but I think that at some point I'm not sure what I mean, and I'd like to exchange more about it. Yeah, that's some prompt. I don't know if it helps, but feel free,
Yeah.
please, to share any other thing.
Great. Yeah, I see Divine has his hand up, so I'm going to ask Divine. And just to speak back, you mentioned three things: accessibility to hospitals, the ethics of healthcare, and also transdisciplinarity in terms of how we work. So those are three topics that people can consider, as well as the idea of future studies and speculation. But Divine, asked you to unmute, and please go ahead.
Yeah. So thank you, Fanny, for your presentation. I mean, your work is really fascinating, and it's a timely work, especially for the work that we want to do. So I have a lot of questions that I would like to ask, but I think I should start from where you started, especially the discussion around the Chinese hospitals. I think my first to unpack, if you could unpack further the notion of hospital multiple. I mean, what you really mean by this, and how we should understand or how we should use it or deploy it. I think it will be particularly useful. And then on the Chinese hospital, I'm wondering how much is the interest in the Chinese hospital the product of the interest in China right now? And how much is it framed by the discourse of China? And how can we separate that discourse from health? And is it possible, to separate that discourse from the health issue? Because health is politics, as you have already indicated. There is a political economy to it also. And then the second is, I grew up with a lot of Chinese assistants already, in the country. That by then, this big hula hoop about China wasn't really big. It was still a third world country, and still dominated by communism. I mean, that was the discourse at that time, but the Chinese were really involved in a lot of social projects then, building roads, building hospitals, building agriculture, and also, there was health, at that time. I recall lots of malaria medication that we had, then coming from China. So I'm just trying to see, if it is possible to distinguish between the discourse of China and health, or China's relationship to health or work with health at that time. And if that has shifted, and if it's different, you know, to the discourse of the relationship with health right now and the hospitals. So that would be my second. If I, Ralph, if I can ask another question, or I don't know. Okay.
Sure.
If I could ask another question. So the technology is also at the center of lots of health evacuation. So I'm sure many people would like to be treated on this continent. But we also know how much it costs, not just for people on this continent, but in Europe. I mean, how much, how many exclusions insurances have, because, you know, they really don't want to cover certain technology or innovations, you know. And I'm also wondering how, what the place of technology, how much these new hospitals that are being built on the continent, whether they are just infrastructure, just buildings, or just structures, or whether technology is at the core of this. Because if technology is not at the core of this, then we are still in the process of reproducing this dependency and evacuations. Because without this technology for cancer, for example, you know, technology for pregnancy, technology for, you know, for lots of different illnesses that actually require constant innovation, you know. Yeah, I should end there for now. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, great. So many questions.
Thanks,
I am not sure I'll be able to answer them all, because they invite to so many deep reflection on this work and beyond. But I'll answer on China. I think I can take a few moments to say that we actually I should, rather than unpack the hospital multiple, I will unpack the Chinese hospital. You know, it's clearly not a good term. It's a hospital built by China, and we try to trace actually the relationship of this building, this hospital, with China. What are the connections? How it relates to China? We could not do it extensively, like we should have been doing this for the medications that are donated, that are sold, the materials, the equipment. And what we did more is to try to question the medical cooperation. And what happens is that these hospitals are given through, you know, the long-term friendship and diplomatic relationships. And countries in Africa are paired with provinces in China. And so Niger is paired with the Guangxi province. And we actually went there. We did a mission with my colleague, and we tried to meet physicians who were involved in past medical missions. You were referring, Divine, to these Chinese assistants, and it's actually, you know, the barefoot doctors and the what we call the China medical teams. It's a very long and steady kind of cooperation that has never stopped, and that is very important for China. Actually, I think it's more important than technology cooperation, is to be able to maintain this kind of medical team of let's say 30 people who are constantly there. But what happens, and is very important, is that these new hospitals that China is building are also important for China, because they allow China to be able to continue this kind of medical team cooperation, because otherwise it is becoming difficult to recruit China doctors to go to Africa. They no longer want to go. It's not attractive. They get good salaries in China. They get, you know, all the kinds of middle class life that is enjoyable in China. They don't want to spend two years in Niger. And before this centralized China-built hospital in capital cities, the medical team was all over Niger, including very remote areas in the desert, and so that is changing the kind of health cooperation, because now all the medical team is affected to this particular hospital, and it's also a way for China medical doctor to be able to practice the kind of medicine that they want to practice, specialized medicine, and that they could not practice in the remote area. So I think it's very interesting, and I do agree about, you know, the importance of acknowledging the practical, empirical China cooperation in terms of agriculture, in healthcare, and yeah. Now, in relation to technology, I cannot really expand a lot on that. I think it's for the moment a failed promise, because the services are opening in this new hospital with you know, shortcomings in terms of equipment and materials, and it is equipped by what is given by some foreign powers, and it's not entirely appropriated, but it's the aim that such and such services are staffed with, you know, young, promising specialist doctors, and they will, you know, arrange themselves for equipping their services. So it's ongoing, and yeah, I think I'll stop here, Divine, for your questions that were really interesting.
Thank you, Fanny. I see in the chat that Chikezi has a question, and you could have a quick look at it there. But I think, Chikezi, if you wouldn't mind saying it, I think it'll be good for the archive to hear your voice.
Maybe I can try to read it. Chikezi?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Fanny. Thanks.
Okay. I wanted to ask a question in relation to geographical differences in thinking about the multiplex meanings of hospitals. What difference did you observe in hospital as a site for social, economic, and political challenges between Africa countries and other regions? I think it's a big question. Would you mind maybe unpack your question for me?
All right, let me help.
So multiplicity can have different meanings in different regions.
Yeah, so I was thinking about what you said about the geographical meanings of hospitals. That's the kind of meanings that the idea of hospital can take in different regions of the world. So I was thinking in terms of your research and your findings so far in your work. What are your observations? What are the observed differences that you notice between African countries and other regions in terms of the meanings that that the idea of hospitals, or the challenges that the idea of hospitals expose for things such as the social, political, and economic challenges that it represents? I don't know if it's clear.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, no problem. It's just that it's a very, you know, challenging question. I think there are two things maybe that come to my mind. One is, I must say that I mainly worked in the African continent, and of course one thing is to challenge both the notion of, you know, collapsed institution and ruined institution, and the idea of inefficiency and this kind of discourse. and at the same time trying to also challenge the hospital centralism, the hospital centrality in healthcare system. That is, and of course the colonial background of all these hospitals and what they have become. That's one thing. And the other thing that I wanted to stress is a challenge that we have, and of course today with COVID is really interesting, is to think through south-north circulation of models and achievements. And I cannot think of differences with regards to your questions. I don't think it's I am not sure I can think through differences or similarity, but I wanted to stress that what the portrait of the failed hospitals that we have sometimes in the African continent, that we are clearly in a situation where in Europe, North America, hospitals were certainly completely overwhelmed, completely in a complete state of distress. And currently the situation in Paris, France, it's just that it's very critical. So, and I think it's the very moment to maybe try to think from the south, and we knew that we were also living in austerity Europe. We had this analysis of health system and hospitals suffering from shortages and insufficient investment and structural adjustment in Africa. But how can these be used to understand what's going on right now in Europe since maybe 1 decade, and that is ending in such a situation of distress, of complete investment, of neglect of what it means to have a public healthcare system. And it's very critical in France, where there are demonstrations and people are very mobilized, and at the same time they have to be at the hospital to take care of patients. But what they say is that we are abandoning the public hospital and the idea of the public hospital. So in a sense, I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I like it, and I think it's an invitation to think through different experiences over different periods of time, and how this can inspire us in various projects and in various time frames.
Thanks. Thank you, Fanny. And Chikezi says you did answer it. Great. Yeah, just a comment to add to what you said is that, yes, I mean, the South was used as a sandbox for trying out things like privatization of healthcare that now has been implemented in Europe, and now we're seeing the results in the centers of power as well. So Claire Lester, you from Humor, you have the floor.
Hi, thanks so much, Fanny. This has really been fascinating for me. This is also a new field that I'm getting into, and just reading through the articles for this seminar, just to use that as a filter to understand what's going on around us in real time. With COVID, it's this idea of multitudes has been really helpful. Like yesterday, I read an article published in an online newspaper, which was it's called the Daily Maverick, about hospitals in the Eastern Cape, where cancer children were wrapped in curtains because there wasn't any linen available. So what you brought up about the public and the private sphere, and how in this case, there's a public hospital that has privatized or outsourced its laundry services. I think your concepts provided in these papers are just will really go far in helping me personally think through things. But I wanted to actually draw on your presentation on how you noted the change in discourse or language of to medical center rather than hospital, which I thought was fascinating because in Cape Town, what I've noticed just this, that there are these new medical centers that come up, but also even in the sort of what we'd see as the non-medical realm, this language of care and wellness has sort of permeated everyday discourse, like a smoothie bar, which offers a wellness smoothie, and there's everything's health and wellness. So I just want to know if you could say something more about what you've noticed in these shifts in language and discourses related to hospitals and care, and maybe offer some insight as to why this might be the case in recent years.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Claire. It's really interesting, and I'd love to know more about your work. But yeah, I was fascinated by this this shift in terms and the way that hospital is also, you know, can also be used as a synonym of old-fashioned or, you know, inefficiency, or I don't know, in France we are often reminded that hospital is you know, it has a legacy of, you know, hospitality. It's a place where the poor could always come, and it was built actually to look after, to take care of poor people. So I think it's the idea that, you know, hospital can inspire notions of old-fashioned, of out of date structure. And I think it's really important to see what's happening with the birth of these new medical centers. Often these are private structures, actually. Medical, it's more common in private structures, and yeah, from what is really interesting is that you know, hospitals have their history, and people are attached to this history, to this location in town. And I was mentioning yesterday in another conference we had with Divine, that in Paris there is a new hospital project. I worked in a hospital currently that is going to disappear, and you can see the tensions around whenever it is mentioned, this new hospital, which is supposed to be better, which is supposed to be, you know, good, that actually I haven't met one person who is enjoying the idea that there is going to be a new hospital. Of course, it's not for now, because this project takes, you know, years and years and years. But everyone is very anxious about this new hospital. It's not going to be the same name. It's going to be a name hospital, but this shift in location, in names, are very meaningful, I think, in testifying for how people relate to the kind of infrastructure, to the kind of memory, and for the example of the charity hospital that I mentioned at the beginning, you know, in demonstration, people were having, you know, were writing, "I'm a charity baby. I was born in charity hospital. I'm a charity baby. I will, you know, and a nurse was saying, I was born in charity, I worked in charity, and I will die at charity hospital." And the kind of, you know, yeah, real attachment to a place, and to what that place mean in terms of, you know, social experience, history, and yeah, and community experience. So yeah, I think that's what I can say.
Thank you very much, Fanny.
Thanks. Thanks a lot.
I see that that Divine has his hand up. There we go.
Thank you, Ralph, and thank you, Fanny. You spoke about accessibility as a key challenge, and I think listening also to what to Claire's comments and question, and also some of the conversations we've had. I mean, decentering seems to be like a process that is happening, that some of the key stuff that was associated with health, because I mean, we grow health centers, then hospitals, clinics, it's constantly shifting for some people, especially if you're in the South. I mean, one morning is a health center, the next morning is a clinic, the next morning is a hospital, the next morning is something else. So, but now also what we're experiencing is this decentering, that a lot of those things that were associated with hospitals are now being being taken up by shops, for example, health shops, health foods, and stuff like that. I'm just wondering, what does it mean for power, the power in particular, because the hospitals were very key for, they were a key instrument of control. It was one of the first places where people had contact, you know, also with the colonial and the imperial force. I mean, apart from the church, you know, so the hospital was also really a key, this care thing. And I think over time, many governments have also used it as an instrument of control, but also as a space to distribute precarity, because in a context of precarity, you can defund a hospital and just allow people to die or to wither, you know. And I'm just wondering, when one is imagining the future hospital or the future of the hospital, what does one do with this power that has been at the core of hospitals? Because in a way, one could say that the hospital has been one of the key instruments of necropolitics, that you know, there's the kind of slow death that, you know, we can allow you by not bringing you technology, by not giving you doctors, by not giving you nurses, by not giving you infrastructure. So in a way, we're actually killing you, you know. So when one imagines the future, how do we think about this power, and how, so others will say, how do we decolonize? I don't want to talk about decolonization. I want to talk about power. How do we think about the hospital, that in which this power is not so key, you know, it's not so central?
Thanks, Divine.
Well, Divine, if you have yet another big question like this one, maybe you can you can leave it for some. I mean, yeah, big questions, and really agree about, you know, control and change in precarity. In, you know, I think I will just end by an anecdote, you know, because these questions are too big, and I really, I mean, power is also something that circulates, right? It's power. For example, those, you know, physicians who are resuscitation doctors who are just saying, like, we are completely important. We are, and you know, and power is resistance. It's also resistance to this sudden incapacity of, you know, working to save people, and the increasing number of deaths. Really, these days, I think it's something that is crucial in the way it is transforming what's a hospital today. And so the anecdote is just that yesterday we had a visio meeting with people interested in groupings of hospitals who are dealing with how to count the dead, because we work at the mortuary room, and we were interested in getting some numbers of figures. And yesterday it was also the time when France, I must say, kind of announced the 100,000 deaths of COVID. And we actually realized with these people and with our own experience that no one knows how to register death, you know, to be able to be certain that these are COVID deaths, these are not COVID deaths. And it's this completely uncertainty about, you know, how to count the deaths. I mean, so it's power and the hospital as an instrument of necropolitics is really there. And also we were chatting about the way these mortuary rooms are organized and how they dealt with the sudden increase of bodies, and how is this going to be dealt with in this new hospital that I was mentioning. Are there plans for, is it going to be a hospital where there is going to be a lot of death, or is it going to be a hospital that is going to be deadless? That what everyone wants, but at the same time, people, we do die in hospitals. So how do you, at the same time, build this hospital of the future that you want a hospital of wellness, of self development and wellness, and at the same time you deal with the hospital that has to be some place where you can deal with sudden massive deaths or sudden increase of people dying. So I don't want to finish on that difficult tone, but also death is part of life, but it's interesting what it opens in terms of the multiplicity that we were trying to unpack today. Is also the place of dead bodies, and in these particular places. Yeah, I'd like someone to try to find another conclusion, but maybe
that's yeah, that'll be me. So thanks Fanny, thanks to all the participants. Yeah, you mentioned the words speculative and speculation earlier, Fanny, and I wanted to just pick up on that to say, when I hear the word speculative, the next word I think of is fiction, speculative fiction, which is another term for science fiction or a kind of science fiction. And I think often medicine and healthcare is in there in these fictional like movies and texts with miraculous machines that will heal us or prevent death. So yeah, I think we should have a strong strand within our research which looks at science fiction and speculative fiction, and that is also an informant for future studies, which is also an area that we're looking at for this research. So thank you very much for your exploration of the future hospital in Africa. Great material for us. And thanks to everyone who participated and asked questions and was here for this. Much appreciated. At the moment, we don't have an entire seminar next week because we had a postponement. Next week's speaker can only speak in the second semester. So for the moment, next week is off. And if that changes, you'll see it on our Facebook page and on our website, the HUMA website. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you again, Fanny.
Thanks for the invitation, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Yes, and the same to everyone. And thanks to HUMA for hosting this discussion. This has been an entire seminar, number 6 in the series.